The COVID-19 pandemic shook the world with the unbelievable speed at which it was spreading. If you were following the cases per day, you would have seen hundreds of thousands of new cases constantly popping up. While we've been managing to survive this pandemic extremely well, there were cases of much more terrible viruses in the past. We can't help but wonder, would we be able to survive the pandemic of old today? In this video, we are going to explore how we would survive the Black Plague today. Keep watching to find out. If we're going to know how to survive the Black Plague, there are two main points we need to address. Firstly, we need to understand the severity of the plague, and we need to understand what the disease actually is. For this, we can dive into the history of this malicious disease. It's thought that the Black Plague started by what's known in Europe as the death ships. I'm sure some of you can guess exactly what these ships entail. If not, they were the ships that had sailors who were infected with the Black Plague. However, it's thought that this deadly plague was already affecting people in the Near and Far East Asia before it spread to Europe. Even more surprisingly, it's actually thought that this deadly plague has existed since 3000 BCE. That's 4,000 years before it actually became a pandemic. The plague was thought to spread through traveling merchant ships. Sounds quite similar to how COVID-19 spread, right? Of course. This deadly virus was extremely contagious and also horrifyingly efficient. In fact, there were some cases where a person who was totally healthy during the day but was already infected with the virus unknowingly would be dead by morning. That means you could die in possibly under 24 hours. Whoa, scary. The Black Plague is a bacteria called Yersinia pestis, named after the French biologist who discovered it. There is a key factor to note. The fact that the Black Plague is a bacterium and not a virus makes it immensely more threatening. But why? The key is in the way these two organisms function. A virus needs a host to spread and be effective. If there's not a host, the virus dies. This is not the case for a bacterium. A bacterium doesn't need a host to survive. It is able to live inside or outside of a body. If we compare the Black Plague with COVID is a virus, thus needs us to live and reproduce. If we manage to contain the virus, hence the lockdowns, then it will cease to exist. Again, dealing with the Black Plague is not that simple because it would easily survive through a lockdown. A possibly more scary fact about the Black Plague comparing to COVID is that it is carried through fleas and rodents. To make matters even worse, many animals were infected and dying because of the Black Plague. So, not only was fear of catching the virus threatening, but also having a quickly dwindling food source. Yes, there are three different plagues that stem from the same bacteria. The first is the well-known bubonic plague, which is the most common type. It's associated with pus-filled boils that usually begin at the lymph nodes. The second is the septicemic plague, which is much more dangerous than the bubonic variant. This is when the disease moves into your bloodstream, which causes the infamous symptom of blackened hands and noses. Lastly, the pneumonic plague, which is when the bacteria enter into your lungs. This is the rarest form of the disease and ranks highest in terms of contagiousness. Is the plague worrying you already? Well, keep watching until the end of the video, where we'll give you some facts about the plague. We are sure that one of these facts will be both horrifying and calm you down at the same time. As we've said, this bacterium can live in many organisms and is highly contagious. It is usually spread through fleas and rodents, but there are many more ways to catch the disease. You can catch the plague if you touch a living or dead animal that may have had the plague. Any rodents? Work with animals regularly. Spend much of your time outdoors. Are or have contacted someone with the plague. At this point, you might be wondering, what does this have to do with the survival chances against the Black Plague? Well, fortunately for you, if you paid attention, you now have the most up-to-date details about this deadly bacterium. Thus, you can prevent yourself from catching it more than uninformed people. Avoid or minimize contact with people. This is the safest and easiest way to prevent yourself from catching this disease. At this point, since the rate at which symptoms show up range from 1 to 6 days, it's best to avoid contact with people as much as possible, just like we've been told to do with COVID. So it is the same with this horrendous plague. The less you see people, the less chance you have to catch it. Avoid contact with animals. This is just as important as avoiding contact with people, since we know that this plague is a bacterium and not a virus. It's absolutely integral that we avoid contact as much as possible from animals that can be affected. Develop a set of PPE or personal protective equipment. If you're going to leave your home, then having a really solid set of PPE is absolutely vital. Considering that this disease can enter into the body through a variety of ways, it's not enough to simply wear a mask. Also, considering that the primary way that this disease is spread is through dead or infected animals, it's best to protect yourself from possible bites or contact with such an animal. Make sure your home is blocked so no rodents can enter. To state again, rodents are the main way for the plague to spread. We have to drill this knowledge into you as much as possible if you want to survive. It's also important to make sure that any holes in your home are sealed. If they're not, then the chances of you catching the plague increases greatly. Are you enjoying the video so far? Why not give it a like? If you want to see more videos like these, then subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to ring the notification bell for all the latest updates. Remove any leaves, piles of sticks, or bushes. If you enjoy your landscape but are trying to protect yourself from the plague, it's best to remove any low-lying bushes and remove any leaf piles or stick piles. The reason being that rodents love to make nests under these places. It keeps their burrows safe and hidden away from any predators. So, removing any potential places for rodents to stay means ensuring your chance of preventing yourself from catching the plague. Make sure you use bug spray with DEET to avoid flea bites. Now that we know this disease spreads rapidly through fleas, it's absolutely vital to make sure you're protected against them from biting you or any animals you own. Make sure your animals are treated and that you spray yourself before you put your PPE. Some interesting facts. While the resurgence of such a disease is impossible, there are some really interesting facts that surround this infamous disease. The plague is still active today. Some people may be surprised that this bacterium still infects people today. It affects a few thousand people every year globally. However, the biggest reason why the resurgence of this bacterium is impossible lies in the next fact. There is a treatment. Unlike in the 14th century, we have a way to treat this horrible bacterium. As with most bacteria, they are treated with antibiotics. And not surprisingly, antibiotics are extremely effective at treating people with the plague. Both the bubonic and septicemic plague can't be passed from person to person. Yup, amazingly, these two variants, the two common ones, cannot be passed between people. That means that those of old who were infected were simply unlucky to be surrounded by so many rodents and animals who were infected or caught it from someone infected with a pneumonic variant. Unfortunately, knowledge that bacteria are in you before you feel anything was not known at the time the plague struck. All the people had to work with was when you were sick that you had it. So, what did you think of this video? Do you think you have enough knowledge to survive the Black Plague today? Do you know any other extremely deadly pandemics that have existed in the past? Let us know in the comments below. Thank you for watching and see you later.